I don't know. If you can take a nap during this one, I'm doing something really wrong. This is the Astors. I mean, amazing. What an amazing story. So you know what our series is, yes? All right, so we're right in the middle of the Gilded Age, or maybe we're at the end. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And today we're doing part 2 of who? The Astors. And folded right into that is also going to be the Dollar Princesses. Has anyone ever heard of the Dollar Princesses? No. All right, so if you haven't, that makes me happy because I'm going to tell you all about that. And, oh, Pat, can you get through?
I can.
Good. So there's going to be some surprises for some of you now. If some of you know Judy, if some of you know what I'm going to say, just don't say it out loud because I want to surprise people. All right? I'm hoping I have surprises for you today. So let's get started. We've got to do our thing, yes? We have to do this really fast, really quick recap of where we've been. So if we're doing part 2 of the Astors, what do you think we talked about last week?
The Astors.
The Astors, yes, we talked about the Astors. And the founder of this remarkable family is this guy. That's a portrait of him. So I didn't tell you this last week, but apparently he had this portrait painted. He wasn't an especially attractive man, and so when the portrait was painted of him, it was realistic, and he was furious and refused to pay the artist until he redid it and made him look a little better. So this is the rendition that was acceptable to John Jacob Astor. We remember that he was born in Waldorf, Germany in 1763, correct? His father was a butcher, remember? And they were going to go, he and his brother were going to follow in the father's footsteps, except they were going to do it, they were going to settle in America, the New World. Remember that? And the brother came over first, and John Jacob worked really hard, and he saved enough money to get his passage to the United States. It took every penny that he had saved in order to get here to fulfill the plan. But the plan was not fulfilled because of this ride over. Do you remember who he met on the ship?
Fur trader.
Excellent, Bob. He met a fur trader. And when he met the fur trader, he was really impressed with him. This guy looked really, really kind of spiffy, and just he thought, this is what I want to do. And he was doing really well, and he wanted to make money. He had that ambition. And so he decided, all right, when I arrive, he eventually gets to New York, I'm going to go into fur trading. Now, he had to start at the bottom. Remember that? And the very first job he had in fur trading was, does anyone remember?
Beating the pelt.
Yeah, he was beating the pelts. Now, I cannot still find an appropriate image to describe beating a pelt. But he was, his job was to beat up the pelts to get the dust and the bugs out of them. All right, but it didn't take too long for him to get a promotion. Remember that? He got a promotion because what kind of job was this, fur trading? It was very dangerous. It was very backbreaking, exactly. The roads were so narrow, the paths, there weren't roads, what am I saying? The paths were so narrow to get into these areas that you could not bring a horse or a donkey with you. That meant that the men were carrying their supplies on their backs. In addition to the supplies they needed to survive, they had to have stuff to trade, right? So they had to bring all this stuff, and they had to do it, bearing it on their backs and walking. So it was really intense kind of work. So he was willing to do that because it was pretty lucrative, right? if you did the work, why was it lucrative? Do you remember?
Fur was in fashion.
It was all the rage, and they were getting insane prices for these coats and muffs and hats and all of that kind of thing. Now, when he's out, John Jacob, he's out doing his work. He's got something pretty amazing back home, backing him up. Who was that? Yes, his wife, Sarah Todd. So they had gotten married, and when they did, remember, she had a dowry. It was $300. Do you remember that? A $300 dowry. It was, Ken, exactly. It was a lot of money in those days. It was so much money that they were able to open up their own business. And that's what you want to do. You don't want to make money for somebody else. You want to make money for who? Exactly. And so that's what they did. So it wasn't just that she had $300. What else did she have? Remember? She was an outstanding businesswoman. She was outstanding. She was excellent. So she could be back home in New York in the store, and she was running that. She was running the business from home. She was doing an excellent job at it, and he didn't have to worry about a thing, so he could go out and diversify because she was pretty solid back home. In fact, she was so successful that all of her friends and neighbors just thought to themselves, no woman could be that smart. No woman could possibly be that successful in business. It must be
witchcraft.
She was accused of witchcraft because she had this great business savvy, this great business acumen. And it didn't go anywhere. She was fine ultimately, but can you imagine that had happened? Now, I don't know if they really believed it. Doesn't it sound like propaganda to take down your competition? So it could have been either or a little bit of both. Okay, so now they're doing very well, and so they decide that they are going to purchase ships, and they're going to be sending their merchandise back and forth, right? And mainly in Europe. So now John wants to diversify more because he can afford to. He's got more ships, and so he's going to send some of his ships where? Yes, he's going to go to China, and when he goes to China, oh my gosh, he's making a delivery of his pelts, but then on the return trip, he's making money by what?
Opium.
Well, first he's bringing back, that's right, Bob, first he's bringing back teas and spices and silks. So he's making money coming and going with this trade. And then, yes, Bob, you're exactly right. He also decides business is pretty good if he adds something else to sell to the people of China, and that is, does everyone else remember? Did you hear what Bob said?
Yes.
Exactly, yes, opium. So he got into the opium trade, but that caused a lot of problems, didn't it?
Yes.
That was a really big problem. So John Jacob decided that now's probably a good time to change, yes? Let's change things up. And what he decides to go into is, do you remember?
Railroads.
Oh, well, real estate.
Oh, real estate.
Yeah, he decides he's going to go into real estate, and so he gets this farm. He buys this parcel of land. This is from a whiskey distiller who was deeply in debt, and so he got it really, really cheaply. Today is what we know of as...
Times Square.
Excellent, yes, as Times Square. All right, so they're doing pretty well, I would say, for the son of a butcher from Waldorf, Germany, right? That came here penniless. And now he and Sarah, they did all this great business, but they also had a family, as you probably remember, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I was kind of upset last week because I had searched and searched and searched for a family tree that showed the firstborn son, but there wasn't one. I could not find one. And the reason why there isn't one, why they've just kind of expunged this person, is because he had mental health issues. He was disabled, and I guess it was pretty severe, but he outlived his father, who lived into his 80s. So this was a person who lived well into adulthood. So I wanted to not forget him in our little group, all right? I'm doing my little piece for him, all right? So they have, these are their children, and so now the son that's going to inherit is William Backhouse Astor. Yes, that's his middle name, Backhouse. And Backhouse is just the name of friends of the family. So he's William Backhouse Astor. Now, when Sarah dies, she had passed away, and he really did love her, and he missed her. He went into a pretty deep depression. He did not want to stay in that house without her. He didn't want to be just kind of rambling around in that, so he decided he's going to tear it down and rebuild, and what he wants to rebuild is a luxury hotel. And this hotel is the first of its kind in the United States. So it's, it's got every kind of luxury that was available to them at the time. It had, I think, 17 bathrooms were in there, which is an extraordinary thing, like indoor bathrooms. Anyways, it was so ritzy that it cost $2 a night. $2 a night to stay in the Astor house, to stay in this hotel. And all the best people came. Do you remember from last week who came to have a stay there? And then the other person that also stayed there that we thought was really very appropriate was Davy Crockett, because who better to stay in an Astor hotel than the person that made the raccoon hat famous? All right, because really that's how he made his money. So that is very, very appropriate. When he died, he left his will, and everybody that read the will was absolutely shocked by what it said. Do you remember that from last week? They were shocked. There was just absolute and utter silence in the room, and that is because John Jacob Astor left money to charity. That was nothing he ever did. He did not do that. He kept all his money to himself and in the family. And yet here on his deathbed, he had decided to leave some money to charity. In fact, he left an astonishing amount of money, $400,000, for the Astor Library. That's an incredible amount for a library. But that's the endowment. They built the library called the Astor Library, but it's not called that today. What's it called today? Yep. Today it's the New York Public Library. And then he didn't forget where he came from, remember? He didn't forget where he came from. He also left money for what was called a poorhouse back in Waldorf, Germany, and that was to provide services for children and for the elderly. Also in his will, he's instructed his son to burn all of his business papers. So yeah, let's burn those. Now, why would that be? Is there anything suspicious about that? So yeah, burn my papers. All right, and actually when William died, he had his son do the same thing. So it's got to be shady. There's shady stuff happening here. Has to be. All right, so we've got William Backhouse Astor. There's a portrait of him. That's an actual portrait of him. I don't think it was retouched or airbrushed or anything. I think that's what he looked like. And he goes into real estate too, but what kind of real estate does he go into? Does anyone remember? This is the time of the Industrial Revolution. And so what he's building is excellent, yes. And is he caring about the condition of those properties? He is not. Yeah, he is absolutely not. And you're exactly right. He was a slumlord. So we've got John Astor providing the citizens of the United States, or anybody really, with the first luxury hotel, and then we have his son providing people with slums, the slums. How do you like that? How do you like that? Okay, so, but that's the way it is. He's also done this. He bought this farm, and again, he made a great deal, just like his father did. He paid a little bit of money for the Thompson farm. The Thompson farm today was then developed by William Astor, and we know it as, Fifth Avenue. Yes, Fifth Avenue. And then William did something else. William did something else pretty impressive, and that is he doubled. His father's the first billionaire, and he doubled it. That's pretty incredible. All right, other than that, he was boring. All right, he's not anywhere near as interesting as his kids. All right, so let's take a look at his kids. So now this is a really curious thing. We have William Backhouse, and for some reason, his sons, these aren't cousins, these are brothers. And we've got a U.S. line and we have an English line. Does that make any sense?
No.
It makes no sense. If you look at it just there, it makes no sense until you hear the story. Actually, you know what? It doesn't make any sense even if you hear the story. But I'm going to tell it to you anyway. Okay, so now we know that the brothers were each given a mansion side by side. They hate each other, but they're doomed and condemned to live right next door to one another as adults. Now, one of them marries this lady. Remember her? Yes, the famous Mrs. Astor. Now, we went into her story a little bit. We'll touch upon it here. She was quite a snob, wasn't she? Yeah, she was really a snob. And the reason for that, she felt, was because she is old money. Old money, old family, her ancestors arrived here and were the first settlers. They settled the area. It was New Amsterdam at the time. New Amsterdam. Her family settled it. So, if she's going to engage with people that just started to make their money, that would be a step down, right? That would be a step down for her family. And that's exactly how she saw things. So her family, the Schermerhorns, were the original settlers. They're the ones that would be thinking of themselves as the American version of royalty, right? Okay. So would a royal marry a squire? No, you would never do such a thing. Now Caroline, she is the last one born in this family. And so she's probably kind of spoiled, but she's also probably not the person that got priority in the arranged marriages issue, because that would have gone to the older born siblings. So by the time we roll around to her, she's kind of left with, well, the Astors. The Astors, okay? The Astors, they're kind of new money. John Jacob came here with how much money in his pocket?
Zip.
Zip. So they're new money. She is old money. Her family is old money. Not only that, but the person that she's going to be married to, this arrangement, is the second son. The second son. Does that have any prestige? No, that does not have any prestige. So she is not happy in any way at all with this, and actually he's not happy about this either. Okay? So these are two people that really, honestly, actually hate one another. Okay? They really do hate one another, and so because she's miserable, her parents made her go into this, and it was for the money. Okay? What she's decided to do is she's going to fill her soul with her favorite people, the old money people. And so she's just going to have her friends from her classification, according to her hierarchy, okay? They're the ones that are going to go to her lavish parties, okay? And there's a specific number of people that can get in there. Does anybody remember?
400.
Yes, 400, only 400. And it's up to Caroline, or Lena they called her, to decide which ones are going to be able to make it in. So if she says so, you're in. If she says so, you're out. What does everybody want?
Yeah.
To be in, everybody wants to be in. So she is running the whole show, isn't she? She's running the whole thing. All right, now she is in this loveless, hate-filled marriage. Remember last week I was telling you that he would go out and get drunk and then come home during one of her parties, and he'd kind of stumble in and cause a scene. She wound up paying his friends to keep him out for the whole night so that he wouldn't ruin her parties. But they kind of have to hang together because they're supposed to produce a what?
Air.
An heir. And an heir has to be a what? A boy, exactly. So, remember from last week, how many girls did they have right in a row?
4.
Yes, exactly. 4. Girl, 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 girl. All right, now finally, these poor people that had to stay together, they have a son, okay? Oh, they've got a son. And they call him Jack, all right? We're going to call him Jack. We're going to know him as Jack Astor, because everybody's named John and William. It's so confusing. So we're going to call him Jack. Now, as soon as Jack was born, what does his father do?
Sails away.
Excellent. Yeah, I am out of here. I am out of here. And they call his yacht the harem yacht. Because he wasn't going alone. He was making up for all these years that he had to spend with a woman that he absolutely hated. So he's known as the first Playboy Astor. All right, but he did do a little bit of work. Remember, he was sailing down south, went to Florida, bought up some land down there, and decided this would be a great resort area. All right, so it's William Astor who established Florida as a resort area. Not just him, others did too. He's one of the people that established Florida as a resort area. So he made some kind of a contribution, right? All right, we'll give it to him. We have to give it to him. Back at home, we had all this new money riffraff come in. You know, like those Vanderbilts. You know, those people that just made their money very quickly. And so Mrs. Astor was very concerned about that because she has those 4 girls, right? And those 4 girls could fall in with the wrong type, the wrong kind. All right, and that's why she said she was so seclusive with her party. She just was protecting her daughters. Anyway, she ran the show. She did such a good job at it that she had decided, everybody knows who I am. Really, the only thing you have to do when you correspond with me is just put Mrs. Astor. That's it. That's all you need. The post office will know where I am and who you mean. All right. Now, that doesn't seem like a great big deal, does it? All right. In the whole scheme of things, how big is that?
The biggest.
Well, it turned into an absolute outrage. All right, now remember these people have to live next door to each other, remember that? They're side by side. So her nephew, William Waldorf, they're all named William or John, just to give you a heads up. Okay, he is furious because he married a woman. Isn't she Mrs. Astor? His mother's still alive. Isn't she Mrs. Astor? So how dare this person think of herself as the Mrs. Astor? And he was so furious with her over this that they actually went into a social battle. But she's powerful, and who wins? She does. Yes, Mrs. Astor won. Yeah. I couldn't find anything anywhere that even indicated that the other two Mrs. Astors even cared about this. It was all him. It was all him. Well, he was so upset over this that he decided that he was going to leave altogether. He goes to England, and he says America is not a fit place for a gentleman to live. This is a cartoon from a newspaper at the time. So remember, we've got that family tree where we have the U.S. line and the English line. It's because Caroline Astor told people they didn't need to put the address down when they mailed her something. That's why. That's it. All right, so he leaves. He takes his family, the other Mrs. Astor and their children, and they're going to go to England, and we're going to find out what happened to them today. Okay? So before he leaves, he's got to do one little thing. He's got to get back at her because, she won, and he's not happy about that. So the one little thing that he's going to do before he leaves is, you remember the mansion? Yes. Well, he decides he's going to tear that down, and he's going to put up a hotel. You've heard of this hotel, right? Yes. Now, this is a much taller building, much bigger building, right next door to her. Right next door to her. So she's got to have this building that's overshadowing her home. She's got to have construction going on right next door, immediately next door, for however long that lasted, okay? But even worse than that, the worst part of it all is that in this luxury hotel, there's a great ballroom. There's drinking and dining, and you have to dress up to go to this thing. What does that sound like? Exactly. It sounded like the Astor balls that she threw. And so this absolutely ruins her because nobody has to wait for an invitation from Mrs. Astor to go to one of her balls in order to have that experience. And are there more people at the hotel? Because it isn't exclusive. All right? If you can afford the price of it, and if you have the right clothes, you can go there. And are there a lot of new money people that can go there? So this absolutely ruins Caroline Astor. It ruins her. So her son, remember Jack, the baby? He's grown up now, all right? So he loves his mother, and he's very upset about this. His mom's upset, so he's upset. That's how it works with mothers and sons, right, women? Okay, so he's upset, and so he's going to get back at his cousin for doing that to his mother. And what does he do to get back at his cousin? He builds a hotel and calls that the Astoria. All right, so now they're going to compete against each other. But, after a little while, doesn't the business sense kind of take over? And what did they decide to do? Yeah, they're going to combine, and they are going to create the famous Waldorf Astoria. Exactly. So now, eventually, the original Waldorf Astoria was out of date. They had to tear that down and build the new one, and that's what you're looking at right here. But what what did they put up on the site where the old buildings were?
Empire State Building.
Excellent, yes. Effie was the one that got that last week, as I recall. Yes. Okay, so this is where we kind of left off last week. You ready to go? You ready to launch into part 2?
Yeah.
All right, so now we've got Jack. This is the generation that we're talking about today, okay? We have Jack, and of course Jack has to suffer the same fate that the rest of them do, right? Yes. Yeah. Jack has to suffer the same fate, and so he is forced into marrying this woman. Oh, she looks friendly. She was
Nice portrait.
she was supposed to be absolutely beautiful. She was really, really beautiful, but she was mean and nasty, and she was a terrible mother. They had a child together, so their first and only child is not. This isn't him. I know, it was the carriage that I was going for. I don't know who the baby is, but I was like, that looks like a very kind of, ornate carriage, and that would be the kind of thing they would probably have. So I don't know who the baby is, but look at the baby's face, too. So anyways, yes, that was the one I went with. So now, but this little boy, this little Vincent, I guess the mother, she was just so superficial that she would say the most disparaging things to little Vincent, tell him he was ugly, and really put him down. She couldn't stand her own son, and this just caused such turmoil between Jack and his wife, and it also caused distance between him and his son Vincent, because then Vincent was sent away to go to boarding school, and so now there's a distance, and they really weren't able to develop a real strong relationship. He wasn't with either of his parents. Now Jack's bound to this miserable marriage until his mother, Lena, dies. She died in 1908. This is the Astor Mausoleum in New York. Now, once his mother dies, what do you think's on Jack's mind? Yeah. Yes, that is the very, very, very first thing on his mind. All right, so they get a divorce, and then what also can happen? Because now we've got an older Vincent, and so what can happen now is that those two, father and son, can begin to repair their relationship, right? Because all of that stress is out of the way, and they do. They're both enamored of automobiles, and so they kind of rebond because they both have a love of motor vehicles, and they get into that, all right? So now divorce is quite a scandal, right, back then? It's really a big scandal, but it was really overshadowed by what Jack did next. He did something even more scandalous after he divorced Ava. What he did was he then married, he remarried, her name's Madeline, and he remarries Madeline, who is 18 years old, and he is 47 years old at the time. And that is not acceptable, okay? That's just not okay. Not in polite society. That is not all right. But they just go forward with this anyway because they're in love with each other. But to get out of, the environment, they're going to take a nice long honeymoon, and they're going to leave the area altogether, and they're going to go as far away as they can. And they were in Egypt when Madeline, who was expecting, started not to feel well. She was starting to not feel well, and she was getting further along. And of course, the Astors, this part of the family, where would they want this baby to be born? Yeah, so they were in Egypt, and then they went to Europe because they've got to get back home, right? They have to get back home. So, of course, he is Jack Astor. He's probably the richest man in the country. And so he is only going to book the absolute best passage back to the United States. Yes, I'm hearing you all saying it. Jack Astor books passage for he and his wife Madeline, his young pregnant wife, I should say expecting, is that more polite? Wife on the Titanic. On the Titanic. And of course, I don't have to tell you that story, but what I can tell you is the pieces that we know about his personal story with her is that when he was told that the ship was going to go down, the two of them went up to the deck. And he told her to get into a lifeboat, and she said, no, I want to stay with you. I want to stay with you. And he forced her to get into a lifeboat, and he said to her, you are in good hands, and I will see you in the morning. I'll see you in the morning. And put her on lifeboat number 4. He said, I need to know so I can come find her later. Anything, he knew what was going to happen, but he's trying to help her feel comforted that she will see him again. And then once he puts her on the lifeboat and he sees that she's gone off safely, he then goes and he starts helping other women onto the remaining lifeboats, and then he just waited. Now, Jack's body was found because although he did not get a lifeboat, he did get a life jacket. And so his body was found, and when they did recover his body, they were able to recover his watch. He had a gold watch with him, and that watch then was given to his son Vincent. Remember, Vincent had just reunited with his dad, and so Vincent was able to have that watch of his father's. It was very meaningful to him for the rest of his life. He got a lot more than that from his dad, but that was a personal thing that he got from his father. And what about Madeline? Well, she of course survived, and the baby was born. And this is another John Astor who was born now because they had been away, right? They married and they left, and they were away on their honeymoon out of the country. He did not have, Jack, have an opportunity to update his will, did he? He didn't have an opportunity to update his will. And so now we have his son John from his wife. She's only 19 when this is happening to her. So that child only inherited $3 million. Okay, only $3 million. All right, whereas Vincent, he inherited everything else. So now Madeline got $5 million, and then the baby got $3 million, but Vincent got everything else. So now we've got another division in the lineage, and they call them the poor Astors and the rich Astors. We have the poor Astors and the rich Astors. Now, from the poor side of the family, this little John, he just really didn't do too much that was significant. He got married 4 times, okay? And now, doesn't it look like all the same woman?
Yes.
It did to me, too. Do you know how I had to distinguish? I looked at what he was wearing. All right, he has like a different tie, or there's a different something. So anyways, all I know is that he got married 4 times and just, lived his life quietly, and, and then he died. Way more interesting is Vincent. Way more interesting, okay? So let me tell you a little bit about him. His biographer has this to say about him. A hitherto unknown phenomenon in America, an Astor with a highly developed social conscience. Yes, I know. I thought that was such a great line. I wanted to put it in there. You know those tenement houses? All right, well, he sold them all to the city of New York for like a penny. Well, I don't know what it was, but something ridiculously small so that they could have them for practically free and rebuild them. Okay, and he did other things to improve the city. He made a lot of donations in building up poorer parts of the town, put in a lot of parks for kids, things like that. He invested in a brand new medium, which was talking films, right? And the very first movie that he invented was Ben-Hur. The first filming of Ben-Hur. Not my personal favorite, but yes, he made a huge amount of money from that. And then, you know, after he did that, invested in this new fangled thing, he decided that he would publish a newspaper, a magazine actually, a magazine. And do you know what it was?
New Yorker.
Newsweek, yes, yes. So he is the creator of Newsweek magazine. He also hung out with some pretty famous people. All right, his very best friend, you know who his best friend was?
Lindbergh.
Yes. Do you know that they're related? It's kind of distant, but they're related by marriage. And they were absolute best friends. And Vincent, who of course has a yacht and wants to have Franklin on his yacht with him, he built a ramp so that Franklin could go on the yacht whenever he wanted to. Vincent also established a foundation because he wanted to continue. He wanted this work that he was starting to go on and on and on. And so we have the Vincent Astor Foundation, and if you want to take a look at the amounts that have gone into charitable works, and then he ensured that it would go on even after his death, and so he left the responsibilities, this isn't his first wife, but he left his responsibilities to his wife, Brooke Astor. And she took it so seriously that she was personally involved. She would personally pursue what they were giving to, donating, contributing, what they were supporting. She was 100% involved for the rest of her life. And when I say for the rest of her life, it's really impressive because she lived to be 105. So right up until the end, she was personally involved in the activities of this foundation. All right, so now we know what happened to the U.S. side, right? What about the other side? What about the English side? Here we have to follow these folks. Remember William? He has to leave because, you know, this was just too humiliating. He really started it, didn't he? Yeah. But it was too humiliating. So he had to get out of there. As a matter of fact, he did the funniest thing. He faked his own death. So he goes over to England and he faked his own death. But he wasn't even really successful at that because he was found out right away. He was trying to just get out of the public eye. And they just made fun of him mercilessly in the newspapers in the United States because, of course, they knew he wasn't dead. He was faking it. All right, so he had to try something else. And the something else that he tried was to buy his way into nobility. That would work, and it actually did work. So he's buying up all of these estates. All right, so here's one. This is actually a home that Anne Boleyn lived in. Okay, and he's able to restore that. So that's one of the famous ones, and he is the Duke of that area. And then now this is another one that he buys, and he is fixing that one up, and that becomes like the centerpiece for the socialites of the Gilded Age in England. All right, now buying up all this land and restoring all of these historical sites buys him right into what? I know, isn't that nice? Because, well, you know, he's become a baron because now he's a landowner, right? And if you're a landowner, that can get you into the House of Lords, which means that his son, now we're going down another generation, his son has a position in the House of Commons. Now that's interesting, right? That Americans could get these positions in Parliament. But even though that's pretty interesting, these two guys pale in comparison to his wife. Do you know who his wife is? Nancy Astor. And she is one of the dollar princesses. All right, so she's an American. Nancy Astor is an American, and she's coming over to Europe. She's from New Money, okay? And she's making quite a splash over there in England. The English ladies are very proper, right?
Yeah.
Are the American ladies very proper?
No.
Especially if you're New Money, right? You don't have that kind of, you know, couth. So she comes over, she's outspoken, she says what's on her mind, they're really knocked out by her, in a good way, all right? So, so William Astor is just absolutely, you know, enthralled by her, and he wants to marry her, so she marries him. So this is kind of American marries an American, but at the time he was actually an English duke. All right, so this is a dollar princess, and the basis of that is the reason why this becomes a thing is because there are a lot of nobilities. What? Falling down the stairs?
Falling down estates.
Falling down estates. Yes, there are an awful lot of estates that are just going into disrepair. Disrepair. They cannot afford to keep them up. And the reason they can't afford to keep them up is because way before this period in time, do you remember the Civil War?
Yeah.
Where they decided they don't want the monarchy? And they let the monarchy know by beheading him that they didn't want. Yeah, you remember that, Effie, right? Yes. So during this, one of the end results was that you could no longer tax the peasants and have it go to the nobility. All right. So without that tax, they're not earning as much, and they couldn't afford the upkeep on these grand estates. So it was just ripe for this situation that was happening in the United States. We've got, in England, we've got all the titles, right? Okay, but do they have the money?
No.
Now, in the United States, they don't have any titles. Our Constitution is absolutely pretty clear about that. Okay, but do they have the money? Oh yeah, so this is a match made in heaven, right? Yeah, this is a match made in heaven. So what's going to happen here is if we can force marriages between the monies and the money and the titles, then what we can do is we can give them what they want, which is titles and an elevated sense of society, and we will get the money that we need to establish everything. So back to Nancy. So Nancy Astor when her father-in-law dies, that means her husband moves up to the House of Lords, right? There's an empty seat in the House of Commons. Guess who runs for that seat? Nancy did, and she was so impressive. She was so impressive. The way she talked, she's an American, and she's talking, and she's not beating around the bush, and she's not being polite about it. She's just telling it straight, and the people really responded to that, and as a result, she is the first woman to take a seat in Parliament. There was another woman that ran, but Nancy is the first woman who actually had a seat in Parliament. But now Nancy is not the first. She's not the first. There were other women that paved the way for her to go over there and have this impact in England. And, you know, there was actually the need or the interest in having these dollar princesses was so strong that there was a magazine called Titled Americans. Here's a cover of the magazine, okay? And in that magazine, the nobility in England would put ads for their eligibility and what their title is to try to entice wealthy American women to marry them. To marry them. All right, I'm going to take your money and I will let you be Duchess of so-and-so. All right? All right. What is the, what's that show? Thank you. What is it? Downton Abbey. Yeah, Downton Abbey. How many people are familiar with that? Yeah, the mother there, she is a dollar princess. Yeah, she's a dollar princess. Now, the people that paved the way for somebody like Nancy Astor was this woman here, Jenny Jerome. Jenny Jerome was from a wealthy American family, okay? And she is this beautiful woman. She goes over to vacation in England. And when she comes over here, she's just so striking that she catches the eye of this guy. She catches his eye, and, you know, so they have an affair, but it kind of cools off after a little while, but he still likes her. In fact, they had a friendship for the rest of his life. And so he wants to introduce her to his noble friends, and he does. And so Jenny meets this guy, Randolph Spencer Churchill. Okay, now he's very taken with her, and they decide that they're going to get married 3 days after they met. So Randolph goes to his parents and says, I want to marry this woman, she's American, blah, blah, blah. And of course, they're, you know, the snobby elite. And the parents are like, no way. No. They are horrified at the thought of this until they realize that she comes with a dowry of... And so they changed their mind, and they changed their mind very, very quickly, which is a good thing because... All right, it's a very good thing. It's a very, very good thing, okay, because this was happening, okay, and then 7 months later, there was a baby born, and she said that she tripped and fell, and it caused premature birth, okay, the premature birth, and it was really suspect because the baby looked really healthy.
He probably weighed
The baby was a big, healthy, chubby-cheeked baby. And so that baby is who? Yes, Winston Churchill. Now, that is an actual photo I got off the site, and then that's an actual photo too. Look, he's so aloof. Yes, that is him. That is him. Now, later on, this scandal about Jenny, his mother, being born, having him 7 months after the wedding, it was still around as he's a grown man. He's an adult, and he was asked about it. And he must have been so sick and tired of being asked about it. This is his reply. Although present on the occasion, I have no clear recollection of the events leading up to it. All right, so now we know that his mother paved the way for the dollar princesses to come over. So you can imagine that Winston Churchill and Nancy Astor, they were contemporaries, right? They're both in the same place at the same time. There's Nancy and there's Winston. Do you know they did not like one another? They did not have a good relationship, and it is recorded that this conversation passed between them. She says, if you were my husband, I'd put poison in your coffee. His reply, if you were my wife, I'd drink it. All right, so now...
Were they opposing political parties?
They were opposing. Yeah, she actually got into trouble when, I can't go into all of it because, my goodness, what time is it?
4:02.
Yeah, I have to wrap it up here. So I'm just going to finish up with this one last one because they weren't all this humorous. In fact, this is a very, very sad story. Consuelo Vanderbilt, you remember her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember her and her insatiable greed for high society caused her to force her daughter. She actually sold her daughter into nobility so that she would elevate herself in society. Now, this is Randolph's nephew, by the way. That's Randolph's nephew. She held out for the absolute highest that she could get, and she's going to sell her only daughter. Consuelo is her only daughter. She's going to sell her to this man so that she gets a title. Nice, right? Okay, so she's going to do that, and Consuelo is absolutely heartbroken because she has fallen in love with a New York socialite, this guy right there, and they want to marry. She's in love with him. But her mother is so insistent upon this that she locked Consuelo in her room. She's locked in her room. When she continued to persist and resist, her mother literally threatened the life of her beloved. Said, I will have him killed. And then Alva also said that she was so ill from all the stress of all of this that she didn't have long to live, and ultimately under all of the pressure put on Consuelo, she did marry this man. She was married to him for 26 years. And then finally she decided that this was just so unfair, that she was so unhappy. Actually, at her wedding, she was crying. She had a veil on, and she's crying the whole time at her wedding. But she finally decided that it wasn't just a divorce that she wanted. She was robbed of her life, and so she pursued an annulment. And during the investigation for her annulment, her mother admitted, yes, I did. I forced this marriage. I sold my daughter in order to have her marry this man and get a title. Okay, one last one, very quickly. We have one last dollar princess that you might be a little bit interested in. Her name is Frances Ellen Work. Okay? And she is an American dollar princess. She is also the great-grandmother.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yes, really. Yep. So Princess Diana, her ancestry is from the Gilded Age and from this arrangement of the dollar princesses. All right. Do you look at them?
Yes,
Isn't that amazing?
yes.
All right, everybody. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.